There is too much beauty in this world to give up on it yet. And it is always too soon to surrender to cynicism. Bring your doubt, your skepticism, your downright confusion, even your bitterness. But in the midst of all these, in the center, wrap your tender fingers around that still, bright thread of hope. Feel in your heart that still, steady hunger for something more. The vision we glimpse every day in the rising sun across the foothills, the light that spreads across the face of the one we love, the look of knowing all there is to know, and still loving life, loving us, just as it is, just as we are. For this hour, we come to celebrate, to praise, to give thanks, to refuse to give up, to steady ourselves, keepers of hope, brave builders of this still possible world. At this time, we have an opportunity to light our candles of community. You can light a candle for joy, a concern, a hope, or simply to bring more light into this space.
Our world is one world. What touches one affects us all. The seas that wash us round about, the clouds that cover us, the rains that fall. Our world is one world. The thoughts we think affect us all. The way we build our attitudes with love, our day we make a bridge or wall. Our world is one world. Its ways of wealth affect us all. The way we spend, the way we share, who are the rich or poor, who stand or fall. Our world is one world, just like a ship that bears us all, where fear and greed make many lost, but where our hearts can hear a different call.
Let us stand together in body or spirit for our chalice lighting and the spoken affirmation. We light our chalice this morning with our hearts turned to the life and work of our congregation. We believe in the power of human beings to bear love into the world. We carry this tradition for those who find comfort, inspiration, and joy within its real and virtual spaces. We tend the spark of imagination and hope for the world to come. Let us join together in our spoken affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help one another. Be seated. Our opening thought comes from Walter Brueggemann and his work, The Prophetic Imagination. He writes, "The prophet engages in futuring fantasy. The prophet does not ask if the vision can be implemented, for questions of implementation are of no consequence until the vision can be imagined. The imagination must come before the implementation."
Morning has come, arise and greet the day. Dance with joy and sing a song of gladness. The light of hope is shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home. A new day dawns, once more the gift is given. Wonder fills this moment shared together. The light of peace here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home. Open our eyes to see that life abounds. Open hearts to welcome it among us. The light of love here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home.
Our next reading comes from The Radical Imagination, Social Movement Research in the Age of Austerity by Alex Kosnovich and Max Haven. They write, "At its most superficial, the radical imagination is the ability to imagine the world, life, and social institutions not as they are, but as they might otherwise be. It is the courage and the intelligence to recognize that the world can and should be changed. The radical imagination is not just about dreaming of different futures. It's about bringing those possibilities back from the future to work on the present, to inspire action and new forms of solidarity today." Our meditation this morning comes from Douglas Taylor. It's titled "On Imagination and Being an Ally." Let us breathe in and out. In and out. There is one word that is particularly vital to understanding people who are in some way different. One word that allows for the hospitality toward strangers to be real and authentic. One word for the work of being an ally to come alive. The word is imagination. Imagination is the critical piece of recognizing and honoring differences. There is no way to fully understand another person's experiences. You know your own experiences. Someone may be able to tell you about their experiences, but you can't fully understand them the way we like to think we can. In a very real way, we are each isolated within our own experiences. I can only know what is going on from my perspective. You can tell me what you see and experience, but I have to filter what you tell me through the only connection I have with the world, and that is my own experiences. And that would be a dire scenario if that really were the end of the story. But all is not lost. There is hope through imagination. Imagination builds a bridge between what I know of my experiences and what you share with me of yours. This is why so much of religious language is built upon metaphors. I have an experience, and then use analogy to help you imagine what my experience was like. Imagination is the bridge. There are a great many things I have not experienced. I don't know what it is like to have a parent die. I don't know what it is like to feel threatened because of my skin color or my religion. I don't know what it is like to be openly gay. I don't know what it is like to be in prison. I don't know. I have never experienced any other of those things. I can, however, gain enough of an understanding of each of those because I can listen, and because I have experienced many other things, and I know how to listen, and I have a good imagination. Stretch yourself. Imagine a new possibility. Begin where you are. Listen to other people. Entertain strangers in your midst. And stay open to the hope of new being bursting into your life in ways you've never imagined.
May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well.
Our next reading comes from James Cone and his book, Martin and Malcolm and America, A Dream or a Nightmare. Cone writes, integrationism and nationalism represent the two broad streams of Black thought in response to the problem of slavery and segregation in America. Of course, no Black thinker has been a pure integrationist or a pure nationalist, but rather all Black intellectuals have represented aspects of each, with emphasis moving in one direction or the other, usually at different periods of their lives. What emphasis any Black thinker made was usually determined by his or her perspective on America. That is, whether they believed that Blacks would soon be included in the mainstream of American life on a par with whites. When Blacks have been optimistic about America, believing that they could achieve full equality through moral suasion and legal argument, they have been integrationists and have minimized their nationalist tendencies. On the other hand, despair about America, believing that genuine equality is impossible because whites have no moral conscience or any intention to apply the laws fairly, has always been the seedbed of nationalism. To understand Martin King's and Malcolm X's perspectives on America and their relation to each other, it is important to see them in the light of these two different but interdependent streams of Black thought.
Please join in singing hymn number 301, Touch the Earth, Reach the Sky.
Touch the earth, reach the sky, walk on shores while spirits fly, over the ocean, over the land, our faiths look west to understand. Touch the earth, reach the sky, children ask the reasons why, in our lives the answers show, and by our love they learn and grow. Touch the earth, reach the sky, all are born and all shall die. Life's the time left in between, to follow a star, to build a dream. Touch the earth, reach the sky, hug the laughter, feel the cry. May we see where we can give, for this is what it means to live. Touch the earth, reach the sky, soar with courage ever high. Spirits joining as we fly, to touch the earth, to reach the sky.
The world in which we live today is influenced by imagination. It's influenced by the imagination of those who have come before us, and also by the imagination of those who are living now. And more often than not, the world in which we live is the product of the imagination of the powerful and affluent within society. The question today is, how can we create an alternative prophetic imagination that will help us create a world that brings justice to all, including the most vulnerable? Imperial imagination, the imagination of the empire, perpetuates a nightmare for those whom it exploits in order to maintain and to expand its power. Prophetic imagination embraces the freedom to dream of liberation from this nightmare. Unfortunately, we are currently living within systems that are perpetuated by imperial imagination. As the Christian theologian Walter Brueggemann reminds us, prophetic imagination is needed to help break us free from imperial systems. But it involves much more than simply pointing out what is wrong with the way things are. Prophetic imagination engages in criticizing the current unjust systems while also energizing persons to imagine new and more just systems, and then to take the action that is necessary to bring into being a more just and more beloved community. In the Christian tradition, if you look at the Synoptic Gospels, the first three Gospels in the Christian Bible, Jesus is portrayed as having to resist the temptations of being recognized as powerful before Jesus begins a public ministry of good news and liberation with the poor, the vulnerable, and the oppressed. The power that is expressed, recognized, and celebrated by the wealthy and the elite is the antithesis of the way of love, justice, and liberation that is expressed in Jesus' ministry. In the prophetic tradition, in the Hebrew Bible, there is a clarion call for persons to strive for justice for the vulnerable and liberation of the oppressed, rather than clinging to power and its trappings of ease and prestige. In Buddhism, the Buddha reminds us that enlightenment and the compassion that flows from enlightenment are not possible if we are attached to power, are not possible if we are seeking recognition and approval from the powerful. We can never actualize ourselves authentically if we are seeking our validations as persons from the powerful. The economist Tim Jackson, writing about the thought of the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh, points out that in Thich Nhat Hanh's book, The Art of Power, which was published in 2008, Thich Nhat Hanh argues that what we think of as power in Western society is really a form of craving. Craving for wealth, craving for property, possessions, status, comfort, sex. And also craving for dominance over others in pursuit of these things. These cravings are the source of personal and societal suffering, and they are used by the imperial imagination to gain even more power and control over our lives. Thus, we see in many different traditions that the path to our best selves, is not paved with power. It's not paved with wealth. It's not paved with cravings, but rather it is paved with love and justice and compassion. And one of the most important decisions that we can make in this life relates to whether or not we will resist the lure and the temptation of embracing imperial power, and rather than accept the call to embrace the vulnerable and to liberate the oppressed. This choice is the difference between a life of subservience to the powers that bring privilege and prestige and a life committed to love of the least and the lost and to the transformation of unjust and oppressive systems that keep them from flourishing. When imperial powers bring us to a high place and show us all of the power and the glory they are willing to give us in exchange for our obedience, our answer must be a resounding and life-giving no. The prophet, the one with a prophetic imagination, should mourn and criticize actions that enable the persistence of situations that compromise core values, that compromise the core values of love, justice, and oppression. And the prophet, the one with prophetic imagination, must imagine alternative policies, alternative visions that define our interests as a human community on the basis of those values. This was part of the prophetic power of Martin Luther King Jr., because he had the power to imagine what a more just community looks like. And he also, at the same time, had the power, as we know, to energize persons in the difficult and oftentimes sacrificial work to actually bring beloved community into existence. The champion for social justice, Bell Hooks, also expressed this power of an alternative and prophetic imagination when she wrote, "There must exist a paradigm, a practical model for social change that includes an understanding of ways to transform consciousness that are linked to efforts to transform structures." She saw the important connection between our consciousness, our ways of thinking, and the structures, the systems, the unjust systems within our society, and the need for us to transform them. The great social activist Dorothy Day also expressed the power of prophetic imagination when she proclaimed, "Our problems stem from our acceptance of this filthy, rotten system." Day recognized that in order to change our unjust systems, we have to resist accepting these systems as an unchangeable given. We must reject the unjust systems and bring forth new systems through an alternative, prophetic imagination. There's perhaps no other time during the year than this period, than the 4th of July, that we as a society get more mixed up about what it is to have an imperial imagination versus a prophetic imagination. There is perhaps no other time that our idolatry in relation to imperial imagination and imperial power is more on perverse display than on the 4th of July. The 4th of July, I like to remind my colleagues in Christian ministry, which is my tradition, I like to remind my colleagues that the 4th of July is not a Christian holiday. It's not even a religious holiday, but that would be difficult to know if you visited the vast majority of Christian churches in the United States this morning. So many churches and so many religious communities are marching so much in lockstep with imperial power brought forth by imperial imagination that it has literally become an object of worship, the very definition of idolatry. It is important to emphasize that the liturgical color in the Christian tradition for today is green, not red, white, and blue. The Pledge of Allegiance is not a Christian creed to be recited in church. The American flag is not a Christian or even a religious vestment. The national anthem is not a Christian hymn. It's difficult to cultivate an alternative prophetic imagination for a more just and beloved community when we are literally worshiping the symbols of imperial power brought forth by the unjust systems of imperial imagination. Walter Brueggemann once again reminds us that this is not prophetic imagination when we do that. He calls it pathetic imagination. What our communities and our societies as a whole need most, what they need most from our religious communities, is an alternative, prophetic imagination that shows us that we do not simply have to accept our filthy and unjust systems as they are, and that energizes us all to work towards something new, towards something more loving, towards something more just. May it be so. May we make it so together. And at this time, we have an opportunity to give. You may give at the table, and there's also opportunities to give online.
Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day.
We will go out in the world and we will say who we are. We will lift our voices strong and face the tide. There is one prevailing justice and it's ours to uphold. We will go out into the world. As I learn the power of compassion and love, and I see the work that has to be done, I will give my whole commitment to the task that's set out, until I start to see that change has begun. We will go out in the world and we will say who we are. We will lift our voices strong and face the tide. There is one prevailing justice and it's ours to uphold. We will go out into the world. I can make a difference every day if I choose, whether joy and love will win or lose. As close as friends and family or as big as the world, this work I will embrace and I will do. We will go out in the world.
Let's stand and body our spirit for our parting thought and for the extinguishing of the chalice. Our parting thought comes from Maria Montessori from her work, The Absorbent Mind. She writes, imagination does not become great until human beings, given the courage and the strength, use it to create. Let us join in the extinguishing of the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.